Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and today I'm excited to bring you a conversation with Julie DeLucca-Collins. Julie is a TEDx speaker, business coach, co-host of the Casa De Confidence podcast, and award-winning author whose mission is to inspire entrepreneurs and leaders to reach their full potential. With a career that includes serving as a chief innovation officer for a multi-million-dollar company, speaking at Fortune 50 corporations, and earning recognition as an expert in women's leadership, Julie's accomplishments are expansive. But what really stood out to me wasn't the on-paper accomplishments. It was how she navigated through the challenges in her life and has proven that resilience and authentic confidence are the keys to personal growth and development. So Julie, I'm so happy that we finally get to talk and do this on the show.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this time together because, listen, I am a listener, and I think that for me, being on podcasts for individuals that I love, and I got to love you even more when I saw you in person. It's a treat.
I was going to say that, right? So we should tell the listeners that we know each other in person. Well, we first met at New England Podcasters Group, which they've heard me talk about before.
Amazing.
But then we were lucky enough to get to spend a few days at PodFest last week.
I know.
And it was fantastic.
I loved it.
For so many reasons, right? But the things that, again, stuck out to me about you, which I kind of knew already, but you really solidified. All right, you're wicked smart, so that I'll just say that.
Oh, I like how you say that with your New England accent.
I know.
Oh, very nice.
But you're also a very generous person and willing to share your experience and your expertise, which is exactly what I want in a guest, right?
Thank you.
And we talked about this. Let's like help other people who, are trying to come along or do some of the things that we've done. In fact, you said to me at one point that I'm you 5 years ago. And
for sure.
Yeah. And it was like half joking, but half not, because we were talking about some things that I still get blocked with. And these guys know I've talked about it, this coming fully out, being visible. And you talked me through some of that. But I want to go back a little bit so that we can sort of bring everybody up to speed. You've built your brand, Casa De Confidence, around confidence. It's at the center of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure is. I wonder if I know what you're going to ask.
Well, I think I kind of know now that I got to know you a little bit more, but anyone looking at you would think you're a completely confident person. And I guess the question I want to ask in the conversation I want to start out with is, that wasn't always the case though, right?
Yeah. So, I often will tell people there is a level of confidence, right? I'm a firstborn. I'm very outspoken. I don't have an issue necessarily stepping out, raising my hand. But there have been instances in my life in which things have shifted, or maybe I find myself in places that I may not be comfortable for me, and I've taken a step back. But that has been the moment that I made a concerted effort at one point in my life, that every time that I was in these places that I didn't feel confident, that I didn't feel like I had it together, that I was a hot mess, that was my reminder that, hey, girl, fake it till you make it. I know that a lot of people, right, kind of don't like that saying, yet all of us have to fake it till we make it, because we don't naturally begin as experts in anything.
Yeah.
And if we are able to manage our mindset rather than going into a spiral like, oh, I don't know how to podcast, or I don't know how to run a business, or I don't know how to do that, the more that you allow yourself to have these thoughts and spiral down, the more that you're going to see that, you're not going to be able to move forward and make a step forward.
Yeah, I agree so much. And I think where I want to dig into and just paint the picture a little bit more for the audience is you mentioned anytime you go through transition, you had some really big transitions that led you here in front of this microphone. And I know that several of the listeners, probably more than I even know of, have experienced something very similar, as have I. So talk to me a little bit about that period of time that led you here, your special birthday present, and how you were feeling around that time. Because I think that's sort of where it all starts, right? Where you really start moving forward in this space.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for asking. That's really one of the stories that I feel that are relatable to so many. And by the way, if I were listening to this story, I would say, oh, that's me, right? Because I have come across so many individuals that are in this point. Now, let's go back 5 years ago, end of January. I was, as you mentioned, the Chief Innovation Officer of a national educational company. I was returning from a conference that I was speaking at. And I remember thinking, yes, I love what I did. I had great relationships. I enjoyed it. I was good at what I did. I remember thinking, maybe someday I can really go out on my own because, right? I mean, I like to be in charge. And there was still, even though I was part of the executive team, I still reported to someone. I still was working for somebody else's company and vision.
Yeah.
And again, loved it, was incredibly grateful to be part of that organization. However, I knew that there was more, but I was so hesitant to take the leap and to jump. Mainly because, right, we are so accustomed to finding the approval from the world.
Yeah.
And, our mothers told us from an early age, if everybody jumped off a bridge, would you do it? And I don't want to say that I'm influenced by the outside world, but I remember thinking, what will people think if I leave my job? They're going to think I'm crazy. And although I had gotten my coaching certification a few years back, and I'd been coaching and mentoring and volunteering and doing some of that, and I liked it a lot, I could not take that leap.
There's also that level of not wanting to lose what we consider a success and the validation and the constant pats on the back at work. Because like you said, I mean, we're high performers, right? So there's always that. And do you want to let that go? And what's on the other side? And it's scary.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? If I were standing in my role for that organization, right? And I looked, and by the way, I didn't have a crystal ball, but for the most part, I can envision what my job was going to be like, what we were planning for the year, what the role that I had was very defined. And it was a very crystal clear picture. The same way that if anyone is listening to us now and they're working that 9 to 5, they know what is expected of them in the job, right? They know how to do the things. They got this job. They have specific tasks and things that they do. But when it comes to going out on your own, building the thing, I knew that I wanted to coach, but I didn't really know what that would look like on a day in, day out. I had a friend once tell me, and he's a coach and he's phenomenal. And this is way back, even before I decided that this is the way I wanted to go. He said, you need to picture yourself waking up in the morning and walking yourself through what that day is going to look like.
The detail.
And I couldn't do it. I couldn't really okay, do I have coffee first or do I get dressed? And I knew in that organization, even though I worked from home, I was working remote before this was the in vogue thing. I knew in the morning what it would look like. I knew what my first activity was. I knew that I needed to check in with staff. All of that was a very clear picture. Now, for me, taking that leap, it wasn't defined. And although I often tell myself I will figure it out, and that's one of the best things I tell myself, I was not listening to that because, again, what are people going to think? And I never thought, am I good enough? Because I've had a level of success, but I did think, could I make it work so that I can continue to have the life that I enjoy and not, be a failure? Because that's the other piece that most of us are afraid of, the failure and the tripping. And for so many years, Marianne, I hated failure because I felt that it was such a definition of me lacking something. And it hasn't been until the last few years that I realized like the best things and the best version of me that I have become has come from the failures that I've had.
So important.
Yeah.
So important. And I think it's even harder when you have finances tied to a quote unquote failure, right?
Yeah,
so this
course.
Wasn't just, I think we struggle with even trying a new hobby or being creative because we might, right? We don't want to be a novice and we might quote unquote fail. But when your paycheck is riding on it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's again, really.
And you like what you're bringing in, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know if I can do without that, right?
Yeah. So that's a huge mind shift around failure. Does anything else stand out to you in your transition with all of this that really you had to really shift your perspective?
Yeah. So, one of the things that was, of course, in the back of my mind, and I will say, and by the way, my handsome hot husband is in the room. So he's listening to this interview from my side. He can't hear you. But one of the things that was in the back of my mind was if I take this leap, if I move forward, I mean, I owe it to him, right? We have a home, we have expenses. And what is he going to think? Is he going to think I'm crazy? And I didn't want to put him in a position in which it was also rocking his boat because I was chasing butterflies.
Yeah.
So I that was part of it. And, incredibly enough, and of course I should have known that, he has been my biggest support system. He has been my biggest cheerleader. He has been my accountability partner. And is everything perfect? No. And of course, we kind of have to, like any married couple, kind of hash things out. But also we have built a brand and a podcast and just a business and a life that we love and continue to work at making better, not only for ourselves, but for the people that we help.
I love that. And for those that don't know, we should mention that he's your co-host. So
yes.
He's on the podcast and he, handles a lot of the technical side of things also.
All of the technical. Come on. Let's give credit where credit is due. If I had to edit my podcast, I would have no podcast.
But I also want to mention the whole fact that he really showed up for you in back to you. I mentioned your birthday present. After the transition. So you tell the story, it's your story, but it warms my heart what he did for you because everybody doesn't have that. So it's so sweet.
No, and I see that every day with a lot of the women and the clients that I have. So, listeners, this is one of my favorite stories too. Like I mentioned, I'm very extroverted. I'm a very social person. So as I started to see that my 50th birthday was coming up, I knew that I wanted to embrace it and I was going to throw myself a big hurrah party. So I'd been planning. I already had the location for the party. I had the guest list. It was going to be a big hurrah. So my birthday happens to be April 26th, if you want to send me a hello and happy birthday then. So I've been planning this, super excited. And then January came about. I came back from the speaking engagement, February. It was kind of like sort of the same, but started to see a lot of that. Oh, I hope that virus stays in the other side of the world, right? And then I started to hear people become more concerned with it. And I'm like, okay, don't be crazy. It's not going to come here. Famous last words. Of course, we went into lockdown in March right away.
Yeah.
And immediately, as my brain tends to work, it went to solve the problem at hand. My company was an educational company. We were shut down for all intents and purposes. And we needed to figure out how we were going to stay afloat as an organization. So I started to explore new partnerships, and I started to, of course, reach out to a lot of the people that I connected with, and making lots of different plans, and so excited that I was making this work. And, we're going to get through this, however, maybe these 2 weeks of lockdown was going to be 3 weeks, maybe a month tops, right?
Yeah.
And then I received the call from the COO of the company, the chief operating officer, and he was incredibly upset. And he told me, I've been laid off. They let me go. What am I going to do? And of course, I went into like, don't worry, you're incredibly talented and qualified. I'm going to put myself in contact with other people. You can do so many different things for people. You can be a contractor or anything, right? And then all of a sudden, it was like a little ding, 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 ding went in my brain and said, wait a minute, he's the COO. I'm the CIO. His role is probably more important than mine. Am I being laid off? So I sent a text to the CEO and I said, I'm on the phone with this person, and am I next? And he said, I'm calling you right now. And then I knew.
Yeah.
And
stomach drops.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, I've never been fired from a job, and not that I was fired, but I was given a separation package.
Yeah.
I needed to be let go because the company couldn't afford to keep us. And what they were doing is they were downsizing, in which they were keeping just the in-person personnel that was doing the tutoring with the kids, very minimal. So immediately as he said it, yes, it was that moment that I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing my job. But it was also the excitement of, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And yes, it was a level of grief in there too, Marianne, because, and I don't think you and I talked about this and that I've shared a little bit, but the company that I worked for, the founder of the company, she and I had become friends. She recruited me to come work for her with the intention that she wanted me to take her company out of New York and expand it nationwide, which we did. Now, in 2017, she passed away of cancer. So I lost my friend. I lost my boss. And there was a lot of uncertainty, and I stayed with the company. And this was the other reason why I didn't take the leap to going out after my dreams immediately, because I felt indebted to making sure that her legacy continued. So when I lost my job, it was also not only losing my job, but it was going through the grief of losing my friend and my mentor, because she was an incredible mentor, all over again. So now fast forward to April, and I already, launched my Go Confidently coaching services, right? And I was kind of plugging along, and I was so excited because, I was going to focus on the most important things, like creating a logo for my business and building a pretty website with the pretty scripty fonts, right? That's what I was focusing on. And then I was excited, right? Because, oh my God, I can't wait for April 26th. I'm going to have this great, great big birthday. But my husband saw the writing on the wall. He knew that was not going to happen. He knew that we were in this lockdown thing. And he thought to himself, well, and again, I'm putting words into his mouth, but he thought, well, she's been laid off, and now she's not going to have the big birthday party that she desires. And I have this extrovert in my hands. So he ordered podcasting equipment, and he said, you've always talked about doing a podcast. This is it. He's like, don't worry about the tech. You'll be the talent and the talk, and I'll do the tech.
I love it.
And of course, he's had experience in editing and in audio, and he, did that in college. And of course, he works in tech and right now in some ways. And I never thought like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? How do I do this? Because he was taking care of the stuff that was the hardest for me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I started to think about it, I thought, well, what am I going to talk about?
Of course you did.
What should I talk about? And I kept thinking like, wait a minute, what kind of podcast do I listen to? And what is the thing, right? And the more that we talked about, and then of course, I didn't worry so much about what I was going to say, because I always have something to say. but I was more concerned with what the name of the podcast would be because I wanted a really good name. And to this day, I don't know if it's a really good name, but I have often referred to our home. My last name is DeLuca. Dan, my husband's name is Collins. And we often refer to our house as Casa De Collins. And we have a little plaque in our wall that says Casa De Collins. And as I was looking at the plaque, I knew that he was helping me. And I also knew that I wanted people to feel comfortable to come in and have these conversations where we talked about maybe what are their dreams that they chase? What are some of the failures? What are the things that worked for them? What didn't? Because I wanted to normalize for others that when we're seeing anyone outside in Instagram, TikTok, you name it, right? We're seeing the highlight reel.
Yes.
And I often say, I could be doing a really good video and I have my makeup on point and I'm standing in my kitchen in the best lighting, but I may have dishes in my sink and you're not seeing that.
Yes.
So I wanted people to see that, hey, if she did it, if she went through that, I can do it as well. So that's initially what I wanted to do with the podcast, is to have these conversations. But I also felt that I had an incredible network of really amazing women who had a dream and went after the dream. And I could still call these individuals confident dreamers. And confident doesn't mean that they have their stuff together, right? It means that they keep showing up every day and, imperfectly, but they keep that consistency. So that's what I wanted to do. And that's how the podcast was born. And we decided to name it Casa De Confidence, the home of confidence, mainly because also my brand is Go Confidently Services, from the Henry David Thoreau quote, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you have imagined. And that's a quote that very early on, my dad told me, and it has always been sort of that mantra where I was unsure, uncertain. I always reverted to saying that to myself, right? I have a dream. Go forward, go confidently, and just pay attention to the dream that you have, and then you will follow and find the steps to go.
I love that. I love all of that. And I was going to ask about pushing past your comfort zone because it's something we talk about often. Many of us, even if we're in an uncomfortable place, it feels more comfortable than pushing beyond it, right? And you just said it. You just said it's about consistently showing up day after day, week after week, imperfectly as it may be, but showing up to pursue whatever it is, whether it's painting, writing a book, being a podcaster, opening a business, whatever. We all have these dreams that we maybe don't even talk about, but are deep down wanting to come home to. And I always wish there was a magic wand that could make it easy so people would just pursue it, just take that one step and not be tied to the outcome and just start going down the path. What has been your lessons around that? What have your lessons been with working with many women around how to get unstuck, if you will?
I am so grateful that you're asking this, because I think about, and I want to, revert to my first podcast, the first episode, right? I had a dream. I pushed forward. I was going to do it. I announced in social media I was having this big podcast release, and there was no turning back, right? Well, there could have been, or, but I put it out into the universe. And then it came time to record. Sat down at the dining room table, because that's where we were first recording. And I sat in front of the microphone and I looked at Dan and said, what am I going to talk about? Even though I had a name, I had a concept, and I'm like, oh. And then I thought, okay, I have an idea. And I went ahead and I wrote, I don't even know how many, but I wrote questions. And I said, here, these are the things that people probably want to know. Ask me. And so that's how he ended up being the co-host, by the way.
Really?
Because I made him interview me for the first episode. So now to your question, right? And this is exactly what I see with individuals. We may know, right, how to push forward. Like, for instance, if you're in your corporate career, you have certain skill sets that even though you may not be in your corporate career, they're going to kick in automatically because that's your skill set.
100%.
And yet,
Yeah.
even though you're going to push forward, you're going to have that hesitation. So this is where you find your community. This is where you find the person, like in my case, here, interview me. I needed that support. We can't do it alone. And again, once we start to surround ourselves or we have our cheerleader, our support system next to us, then it's easier because we're not going alone. I often refer to the individuals that are there for us. And this is what I aim to do for my clients. I want to be that believing mirror, the person that you can say, wow, I don't see that in myself, but that person is standing with me and is helping me become that or be that or have that or do that. And that's what we need to do with each other. And again, as women in midlife, we have incredible gifts, but we also are going to second guess ourselves because we haven't seen, right? Our mothers weren't necessarily wearing the mini skirts and, doing the fun stuff that sometimes we get to do these days. So we have to find the people that are going to come alongside of us and help us. And as a coach, that's what I that's what I help and hope to do for my clients.
I love that. I mean, that aligns with why I created my Facebook group and wanted to also be there for that group of women and just be there for each other, just cheer each other on, push each other when you need to be pushed a little bit, right? Hold each other accountable a little bit.
Yep.
And I just talked about this on episode 145 when I was reflecting on what happened in January and Podfest. There doesn't have to be one community either. And it doesn't have to be a community or a group. It can be a handful of people.
Yeah.
But what I've found is it's not necessarily going to be your family. If you're lucky, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's not for sure. And it's not necessarily going to be your friends that have been friends with you for 30 years because they could still be your friends, but they may not believe in the same things you believe in or have the same kind of dreams or just believe in growth like that. So you just really need to kind of get that in check and surround yourself with the people that are like-minded, that will support you. I think that's so critical.
100%. Yeah. And by the way, you were talking about this and I had a little memory, and I often tell my clients, your friends and family are not your clients.
Yes.
And by the way, it's okay if your friends and family don't get it.
Yes.
They don't get it. And that's the process. Now, I will tell you, in 2012, when I moved here, I, again, had my job in New York, but the company was going through some shifts. And I didn't know if I was going to stay on board, being that I lived 2.5 hours away. So I decided to kind of run a little side hustle. I was, selling something and working with this company, right? And, one of the reasons I did not make it and become successful with the company, because I was expecting or counting on my friends and family to be that support system. And guess what? If your friends and family don't buy that thing that you're selling, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So you have to find the places to expand your network, because if you have a service, a product, there is people who need it. But again, it's not your friends and family, and you need to, but your friends and family can help you get to the person that may need it. But be okay with knowing that if they don't come alongside you right away, you need to stay the course and find the support system. Because, like Jim Rohn says, we are the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So if we're spending time with negative people that don't believe in the dream, we're pretty soon not going to believe in the dream, and we're going to second guess ourselves.
I love that. And I love that you said expand, because it doesn't have to be a replacement. So you expand your network, you expand the people that you're hanging out with.
Yeah.
It's additive. You can add that too. And listen, as you grow, you may make changes and prioritize who you spend time with differently, but you can add to it. You don't have to take away.
Oh, 100%.
And the other thing I wanted to say was, if you don't have a product or service, if you're not an entrepreneur, this also can apply to hobbies and new things you want to try.
Yes.
Expand your network. They can come along for the ride, your friends and family, or they can sit by the wayside and you can go off on your path that you're pursuing. You don't have to bring them with you, and you don't have to feel bad about that.
Oh, 100%. And the thing is, sometimes, if I wanted to become a marathon runner, I am not going to go to my mom for help on becoming a marathon runner. She never in her life even walked around the walk.
Right.
That sounds so harsh.
No, but
ask her about dancing or anything else, right? If I wanted to do a thing, find the person who has done it.
Yes.
And then ask, how did you do that?
Yes.
What was the process?
Yes.
And I did a triathlon in 2016. I'd never been a runner. I didn't swim. I was not a strong swimmer. I liked bicycling, but I wasn't like a competitive bicycler. So what did I do? I hung out with the people who have done this before and really learned to find the community that helped me. And this is why I think your Facebook group is so important for the individual that needs a support system, a safe place to land, and that you're going to always find that cheerleader that you may need at the right time.
And you just hit on, we joked a little bit when we were out in Orlando around my Easy Pass reference. But I mean, that's part of it too. Part of what you do, part of what I do. It's trying to help people skip a step. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean skip a step they have to go through, but they don't have to get stuck on the path and bang their head against the wall because they don't know what to do next. Yeah. There's somebody else that already did that thing and can tell them the 3 steps they need. You don't need to spend 800 years trying to figure out what the next 3 steps are.
Absolutely. Marianne, if you wanted to start a business, the first thing I'm going to tell you is stop concentrating on getting a logo out there or putting your website out. There's so many other things that are going to get you started. And because I went through that and knew that didn't help me, and now subsequently I've learned, I'm going to tell you the path. What is the first, second, or third thing? And many entrepreneurs, when they're starting a business, want to start at step 10 and they think that this is the thing, but it really is not. You have to start in the thing that makes sense and build a strong foundation.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but that's why you surround yourself with other people. So I'm curious, you have had success going out on your own. What does your definition of success look like now as opposed to what it looked like, I don't know, 10 years ago?
Well, I'm going to go even a little further than that, right? My definition of success, for instance, in my mid-30s into, maybe even my early 40s when I turned 40, it was always having a great job, having that disposable income, having the title, right?
Yes.
And not unapologetically the ambitious person that got the promotion and they were already seeing how they were going to get to the next promotion, right? So that was definitely success to me. When I married a handsome, hot husband and I moved to Connecticut, I had already done the thing, right? And I still wanted to be able to have enough income to be able to go out to dinner or go on a vacation. But success really became about creating a home life and having a relationship with a partner that I loved and that really filled my cup. I had a first marriage and it was sad. I was lonely a lot. And I'm not going to go into a lot of it, but certainly, and of course I could in another episode, but I really was looking for love and to be accepted and loved, even for my imperfections. And success to me after I married Dan became just basking in the love and acceptance that he has. And again, our relationship is by far not perfect, yet that became part of the success. Now, as I move into this other stage of life, right? I love having a business that thrives. I love being able to make an impact in the lives of others. I love being able to still have the type of income that allows me to do the things that I like. However, success to me also includes having, like my friend Katie Jeffcoat says, the intentional bandwidth or intentional margin, right? So that it's not all about work and that there is that blend of taking care of myself, because that's also success. We are in this body and we get older every day, and I don't want to grow to be elderly. I've often said I want to be welderly, well with my mental health, well with my physical health. Because by the way, if you live to be 100, but then you can't even get out of the chair, that's not a successful life. You're going to be struggling. So I want to be able to do all the different things. I have so many big dreams still for myself. I want to go to Machu Picchu. And I was thinking today, as a matter of fact, I was running around doing some cleaning, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm out of breath. And I thought, hey, if you're ever going to go to Machu Picchu, you better start working out again, because you're going to have to walk a lot, climb a lot, and you're not in shape to do it. And if you're going to live the life that you imagine, that means that you do some of the work today.
I agree with all of that. And I think that the fact that you sort of took a step back and now look at success through a lens of, I would say, I hate to use the word balance, but to have more balance.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It really is, because I feel the same way. I did not have that before, and honestly didn't quite know it was missing until I got to a different place, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you kind of always know, but you kind of just push it down. And now I had a point where it's so much more well-rounded, and keeping your home life at the forefront, it just feels right. It's the right time. And I'm curious, you mentioned how your first marriage didn't work out and you were looking for love and maybe in the wrong ways. And now, Dan, who filled you up with love, but do you also think there was a change in your own self-love? Because I sort of...
100%, 100%. I think back when I first met my first husband, and by the way, he's a very nice guy, just not a very nice husband for me, right?
Perhaps it happens, yep.
And I went from a time in my life when I met him in which I was 25. I had some big dreams, but I also felt very stifled, and I couldn't dream big. I knew I wanted big, but I didn't know what dreaming big meant. And all my friends were getting married, and as I was not in a long-term relationship, I thought, well, something in me is broken. And I chastised myself a lot because I thought, what's wrong with me? Nobody loves me. No guy wants to go out with me. And what do I need to do to be different? And of course, when I met my first husband, we were friends, and I loved that he was adventurous in the same way that I am. I love that he had a great relationship with his grandparents. I had a great relationship with my parents. We both loved New York and wanted to build a life in New York. So all of these things build the relationship. And I would say if I loved myself more at 25, I would have seen some of the red flags.
Yeah.
I would have seen some of the things that led me to have a less than ideal marriage. My first husband is gay, and I would have been able to see that. But I was so intent on having, being, doing that I didn't see that. And I didn't stop to say, well, what does Julie need? What does Julie want? And who cares what everybody else is doing, right?
Yeah.
And just go about your life and be okay being alone, being yourself. And it wasn't until, by the way, when I went through the divorce that I knew that was the time where I needed to invest in myself, fall in love with myself and love myself enough that no matter what the relationship that came later, if it came, right? Because at one point I thought maybe I would be a cat lady for the rest of my life, and I don't have cats, but that's what I thought, right? And I knew that I could not enter a new relationship unless I loved myself enough to bring myself fully to the relationship. And I couldn't enter a new relationship if I was looking for somebody else to love me, because their love will always fall short.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, even though I know my husband loves me and is the most wonderful person in the world, he cannot fill the need to love me. I mean, it's a bonus that he loves me, but also it's about me coming into the relationship knowing that, hey, I'm not coming in because I want to be loved. I'm coming in because I love this person. And it's about what I'm bringing to contribute to him, not for what I'm going to get.
I also think it adds to the confidence when you actually can accept that you do have some good qualities and that, you do add value and you don't second guess that all the time.
Yeah.
It does help you show up a little bit more confidently.
Absolutely. And here's the part of it where as I grow welderly, right, that I have more compassion for the girl, for the young woman, for the 30, 40-year-old, right, that made so many missteps, but I have compassion for her because if it weren't for her doing and having and being that, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be the person who I am today. And I do like that person. I mean, are there things that I wish were different in myself? Of course. But this is where we become aware of, hey, what am I doing? How am I able to do that? Oh, maybe I'm not doing that how I would like it to. Awareness, right? Like today, I'm talking about working out and being more in shape. I didn't beat myself up over it, but I did say, hey, that's in a moment that, I would rather be that than not. And how am I going to change that? And really being curious about who we are, where are we, right? And what is the next step? What is the next best step in the process?
Boy, you talked about some of my favorite things: self-awareness, leading with curiosity, and intentionality. Really being able to take a look at yourself and understand, what are the things that you want to work on and what are the things that could change. And I feel like this year there was a lot of talk out there about how every year people shouldn't have to put things out there as a goal and you shouldn't have to change yourself. And I think it ties into what you said about your previous versions of yourself, because we don't have to dislike, though we probably do dislike some of those versions.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's not about poo-pooing on what you are today or where you are today. It's about, where do I want to be? What's my future self want to be like? And that's my word of the year, my future self, because
so good.
Right? Every decision I make, I want to stop and think and be very intentional and say, what would my future self think about this?
Oh, so good.
Right? What decision would you make? Now, I'm not going to say on these airwaves that I'm going to do all the quote unquote right things and pick all the right decisions that would tie to my future self. But at least I'm being aware and intentional, and I'm trying to put that lens on. And as we all know, the more you do something, the more consistent, the more practice you get, you'll get better at it.
Yeah, consistent action gets you traction. And Marianne, I'm so excited that this is your word, your phrase. I will tell you that one of the best things I have done for myself is really be able to connect to that future Julie. I call her Julie 2.0. A lot of people give their future self another name. I don't want to be somebody else. I just want to be a better, more up-to-date version, right? With better functionality. That's who I want to be. And Julie 2.0 is the person that tells me the things that I need to do that will make my life easier. So for instance, I was thinking about this last night, and I went to bed, and I went, I had a meeting that ran a little longer than I wanted it to. It was into the night, and I was so tired. And I walked past the kitchen, and future self to me said, hey, you're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to hate that this kitchen looks like that. And I said, okay, nice. That's nice, but I'm too tired. I'm going to bed. But future self is the girl that actually, maybe leaves the kitchen clean so that Julie in that day is going to have a better day, right? Yes. Julie, future self that really loves, is the one that reminds me to set the coffee maker so that when I let the dogs out, the coffee's already made. Yes. And we don't often, I don't always get it right. I don't always do it. I don't always clean my kitchen before I go to bed. But the more that, beating myself up over not doing it last night or even today was not going to get me to have a good day. So instead, I turned on some music, I got downstairs, and then I cleaned up and I made it nice. And then I thought, oh, look at me go. Future self tonight is going to be so happy that this is clean, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned when you said you were dreaming early on, you had dreams, you knew you wanted to dream big, but you didn't know how to define that big dream.
Yeah.
So for me, part of what I want to do this year, because I haven't, just like you just said, I'm being intentional, I'm asking the questions, but what I haven't been able to do in the past is say, this is exactly what I look like. This is exactly how I move.
Yeah.
This is exactly where I live, like details, right? And I think you need to picture those details to really bring them to fruition, because how do you take the steps toward them if you can't get really clear on what they are? So that's something, again, I'm going to try to practice.
I love that. I can't wait to see it. Yeah. And by the way, I had a conversation. We were speaking earlier. I spoke to someone from Podfest, and one of the things that he asked is like, so what does that look like in a couple of years or even 5 years? And I went ahead and I started to describe, and he's like, wow, that's a very clear picture. And I said, yeah, it's not like I just pulled it out of my behind today. I've been working on that picture for a long time. Right. And now that I have that picture, yes, it refines a little bit here and there. It could shift a little bit, but really in the scheme of things, you do have the big umbrella picture.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I don't want to take your whole night, but I do want to ask you one more question that I love to ask.
No, you're fine. Tell me.
From the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, so many. And one of the best pieces of advice, it's from my dad. And of course, I have a lot of really good advice from him. But there's one thing that he said to me prior to him passing away. And I often revert back to this, and it often comes back, especially this time of year, right? The beginning of the year. He said, honey, life is for the living. And a lot of times we live our life in this automated thing, in this, just wrote like, okay, it's automatic. I'm just going to do this, do that. And going back to what you said, live with intentionality, right? It's not just about like, oh my God, what am I going to do? That's so big. But what are you going to do that maybe is getting that coffee made for yourself? Life is for the living. What can you do today to make your life easier to live tomorrow? And take it one step at a time, and know that it's not about the perfection, but it's about the practice.
And I would add to that, what are you going to do that makes you feel alive? Because back to what you said about, we go through things on autopilot. We forget to smell the roses or, to just notice the birds singing or whatever it is, whatever your dog licking your hand,
absolutely,
whatever it is for you.
Yeah. I when I was doing my dishes today, I turned on my favorite playlist, and as each song was playing, I'm like, oh, I love this song. Oh, I love this song. And then you kind of feel more alive. And whether it be listening to music, or maybe you want to go out and take a walk in the snow, and you just love to take in the winter, right? Pay attention to what's going on around you, because it's fleeting, it's changing. And sometimes we won't have the second chance to appreciate it and enjoy it.
It's so wild. That's been on my mind lately. And I think we get these reminders, and I think we all know that saying, and life is fleeting, and give your people a hug because you don't know if you'll get another chance. And it's so easy to forget that, to get caught up in the, I don't know, being on your phone when you're laying in bed next to your partner instead of talking to them, or getting mad over something insignificant, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
And again, you don't always get it right or perfect, but just try to be more intentional about it. I think it's so important for us to try to just be more intentional.
Such a good lesson. I think that the listeners are so fortunate to be able to have you share these lessons, because I think that, again, the world is always saying, what's next, what's next, what's next? And what's next doesn't necessarily mean running around. It could just be sitting and being in the present moment, noticing what's going on. And that intentionality is what will carry you.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And love all things Julie DeLucca-Collins. So where can people get more of you?
Okay, well, I am Julie DeLucca-Collins on all of the platforms. If they want to get some of my best resources, they can go to the website, goconfidentlycoaching.com/quick links. And all my best resources are there.
And you guys, we'll put the links in the show notes, of course. And don't forget to check out the podcast because
yes,
Julie and Dan are hysterical. Like, even if you don't listen to the whole podcast, which I'm going to say you should, but
you should, yes.
The first few minutes, I don't know, it's a different amount each time, but
yeah, it is.
The kind of, I'll say, preamble that goes on with their episodes. It's pretty funny. So
it's not scripted, by the way. It's whatever it's on our brain. And a lot of times it's in his brain, it's not in mine. And then it's like kind of like a connection of our brains.
It's a little bit of a real life snapshot because you can see sort of sometimes you can see the eye rolling moments and the back and forth differing opinions.
Yeah.
But it's really fun, you guys. So check that out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. No, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
I love being here and I love talking to you. I can't wait to see you in person again in a couple weeks.
Me too.
So fun.
Thank you. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.